Welcome to At Scale, the tnAchieves podcast. I'm Krissy, DeAlejandro, tnAchieves President and CEO. tnAchieves seeks to be humble but ambitious, disruptive yet intentional, and student-focused while also data-driven. We believe our mission is simple: enhance post-secondary opportunities and outcomes by providing holistic student supports rooted in community and accountability at scale. But the work is much more complex. Since 2008, we've broken some things in a great way. We've built many things, and we've created something that stems from the idea that a college credential can be a powerful equalizer. From helping individual students navigate the complexities of college to shaping the way Tennessee thinks about preparing and educating tomorrow's workforce, this podcast explores how tnAchieves intersects with partners across our state and throughout the country. Let's dig in with state and national thought partners, business and industry leaders, college and K-12 representatives, and all the others in between that inform, inspire, and interconnect with tnAchieves work. Here we go. Hi, and welcome to the At Scale podcast. I'm Krissy DeAlejandro with tnAchieves, joined by Ben Sterling. And today we have such an exciting cast of people who spend their time waking up every day thinking about College Promise. Incredibly smart. Both of their backgrounds blow your mind out. And so I'm so thrilled that they're here. How about you, Ben?
I'm really excited about this episode. When we first started thinking about starting our podcast back up, I thought our first guests, some of our first guests should be the folks from College Promise, because they have just shined such a bright light on the work that we've done in Tennessee. I've been really excited to always talk to them about the work that we're doing. And then this is an opportunity to bring them here to talk about how Tennessee and tnAchieves are influencing this discussion across the country and how that could look in the future. So I think this is going to be a really exciting episode, and I think a lot of people are going to be excited to hear where they're coming from and how impressive they are.
Yeah, I remember, first of all, it's Martha Kanter and Rosye Cloud, two of my now great friends and confidants. We go so far back. I actually remember meeting Martha at the White House. And so it was a very cool experience. Martha, I don't know if you remember this, but Randy was asked to introduce what we were doing in Tennessee. He talked he had 2 minutes, so he talked a million miles per hour. But Martha was serving as the first Executive Director of College Promise. Rosye now serving as Interim Executive Director of College Promise, with Martha stepping in as the chair of the board. Anyway, we've got a lot to dig into today, but I won't steal the thunder, and really we'll kick off with asking you guys, what is College Promise? Why is College Promise important? Why did it start? Martha, we'll start with you, considering you served as undersecretary. I'd love to hear your perspective.
Sure. I came into the government having had no government experience back in 2009, except being a census taker when I was in my teens. I loved taking the census because I loved going up, knocking on doors, and trying to convince people that it was worth filling it out. So fast forward to now, 10 years ago, Tennessee Promise and College Promise celebrated this year, our 10th anniversary. So in those early days, the vision for College Promise really came about when I was in the government and met then governor of Tennessee, and the person who really did the nuts and bolts and put this all together, Randy Boyd. And he's now the president of University of Tennessee. But the two of them together came in with a vision that I shared for many years before as a teacher, high school, college, as a policymaker in California, lots of experiences that resonated with their vision, which was, how are we going to make the country much more economically secure, our communities socially integrated, and really have a country that we're really proud of because we will be competitive. So College Promise convened a large advisory board. Rosye came on a couple of years later, and we're really, I think, totally focused College Promise on being the impetus for local and state college. I call it education because a lot of people leave out career training, and we really believe career training and comprehensive college, if you can think of it that way, are tremendous values for the economic development, competitive development of the country.
Yeah, we call it here a big tent around the word college, right? That's how we like to talk about it.
So we started College Promise back then. We had an advisory committee of 38 people. We had the 8-year successful governor of Wyoming being one of our co-chairs, along with Joe Biden, who was then the vice president's second lady of the U.S. And the two of them really gave the inspiration of bipartisan support. And so did our board. We all worked together and we all shared the vision of how do we pull up this country with people that went beyond high school, whether into career training or, college bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, even research, which is so critical to the country, especially in healthcare. So we've had now more than 450 communities where leaders from government, education, business, philanthropy, students themselves, you name it, have come together in all these communities that are across the country. And I'm going to turn this over to Rosye in a second. Rosye, tell us what has happened since then at the state level and maybe some examples of the economic vision that we all share for this country.
Martha, thank you, Krissy and Ben, for inviting us. It's exciting to be here. As Martha is talking, the evolution of Promise is pretty exciting. What began is very highly hyper-local programs, thanks to your leadership in Tennessee, scaled out to, with you all being the first statewide program, to now 38 plus states and more, thinking through how they can scale out Promise in a way that continues to advance the economic opportunity of folks. And I think that's the big message here, which is what we're doing within the College Promise movement is not about one thing, right? It's not about persistence alone. It's not about completion alone. It's about changing lives. I think we all agree that to eliminate poverty, to create and help somebody reach their full potential, careers have to be part of this conversation. The community, the employer community, the broader ecosystem of each state and the uniqueness of each state has to be part of the formula. And that's where we're seeing success, is that each state under leadership of governors and electeds are doing this in a way that makes sense for them, that advances the goals of their economic, mobility and economic development priorities. And I think that's part of why this movement has caught on so well statewide, not just the 450 plus programs local.
I think something that College Promise has done so well from the beginning is really thought about this in a couple of different ways, but specifically, like, how do we put students first always, right? So that has always been the ethos, I feel like, of College Promise. But there, the new phraseology in our space, I feel like, is credentials of value, credentials of impact. But you guys really sort of started with that in mind. I mean, maybe that wasn't the phrase that was coming out of College Promise, but it was never about a degree for degree's sake. And it was never about, let's make sure everybody's doing what's happening in Tennessee. I mean, Martha, I specifically remember with you saying, like, we've got to really understand what works for communities and for the students who exist in those communities. What gave you both that sort of forward thinking to understand that it can't be one size fits all here?
I mean, I would just jump in and say, having been in education at different levels for so many decades, I looked at College Promise as a repository at the beginning. And it was looking across the country for what's working with students. When you ever come up with some ideas if you don't figure out what does work, and believe me, that has expanded over the last 10 years, most exponentially in many ways, services that students needed not to drop out, a mother with 3 children who desperately wants to go to training or education in her community, but can't afford the childcare is one example. Or I had a student that was an A student. I'll never forget this. And I didn't see him in the summer. And I told him to take these particular 2 classes that would really help him get, and he was passing chemistry and all the tough classes. And he didn't show up in the summer. And I called him and he showed up at 7 a.m., in September. And I said, what happened? You were doing so well. And he said, I couldn't afford the books. I'm taking care of my 5-year-old. My wife went to Spain. I'm alone. I don't know what to do. And he really didn't know that a Pell Grant could help. It's not going to be the be all, but what he qualified for could have gotten him the books. So stories like that about students, and then with, Governor Haslam and Randy coming in with their inspiration, I think it was, all of us being inspired to get this country at least 60% of the students beyond high school, because we knew that the workforce training and the education would lift up not only the economy, but the pride in communities that said, these students are worth it. I'm worth spending my time together across these sectors because we have to do more. And I think just my last thing that I'd say, and maybe Rosye will jump in and add more, but as College Promise grew, we became focused on outcomes. And that's where Tennessee was tracking enrollment and completion. That was so critical for every place in the country. And Rosye and I wanted every local community to have some way of tracking results, because without results, you can't have impact. And so we were looking across the country early, who is already doing this, because there were some places like Tennessee that were already doing it. And the other thing we grew on was, what should the policies be? Mm-hmm. What should the local policies be? And I do think the state investments have grown from what's happening with the local results. And also, what research do we need to make the case to the country that this is something worth investing in all levels of government?
Yeah, I think, Martha, as a lifetime in higher education and in focusing on education, my perspective coming to this work came from a national security perspective, a social service perspective, a crisis intervention perspective. So I spent a good almost 20 years really thinking about the stability of countries, of economies, of how at the end of the day, if people don't have hope, if they aren't able to reach prosperity, if they're not able to have mobility, if they're not able to marry and have what I would call the pursuit of happiness as feasible, you really undermine your entire country. You would undermine the prosperity of your nation. And so at a most fundamental level, what we're trying to do here is ensure that Americans are able to access the American dream. And I think we know, when you look at the facts, and we can talk facts all day long, but it boils down to human stories, which is, we know that for the last 30 years, no American has had a higher unemployment rate with a degree versus without, right? Like, we know that the more education you have, the more you will earn over a lifetime. We know that there's a higher likelihood you will marry, higher likelihood of home ownership, higher likelihood of all the things that we know give people that feeling of purpose and prosperity. And so wherever that is in the journey, whether it's a credential, whether it is certain skills that are needed for you to connect to that job that makes sense, right? That allows you to contribute in a way that gives you pride and joy. Like, we want that. And I don't think that Martha or I have ever felt that we get to prescribe what purpose and joy looks like for people, but we want them to have access to those opportunities to be able to define that and redefine that along their adult journey, right? So that it's not just one time, it's a redefinition as they mature and grow in age. And so, I think that's for me, that's the perspective and what I love about the College Promise movement, right? Like Krissy and others, I personally, as a first gen American, as somebody that grew up in a community with a lot of poverty, I saw that people that succeeded, education was a clear, and I think still is one of the cleanest pathways out of economic distress. And so, I think I applaud what you all are doing in Tennessee. I think it's been proven time and time again you're doing this.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you both everyone thinks it's about let's get more students into college, but it really is so much more than that. And the intentionality and the thoughtfulness, I would like to dig around more on. First of all, I've had the privilege of sitting at the table. I actually was showing my kids recently, Martha, a photograph of you and I with Dr. Biden when we were I can't remember, we were in DC. Anyway, it was a random photograph. But we've just had the privilege of sitting at a lot of tables where conversations around policy, especially as we think about more students to credentials and into the workforce in meaningful and impactful ways, have taken place. I would love the thought around, I think you both have done such a great job with the movement on making sure no students are left out, right? So yes, we're sort of 30,000 foot around, these are non-negotiables. But from the very beginning, it's been like, let's not forget about students of color. Let's not forget about working mothers. Let's not forget about, and now there's a focus on males because the data shows us that's where the focus needs to be. Talk to us about, I know you're paying attention to data, but when you set that table, why is it so important that we continue to talk as a group about all the different students that have to come into play? Like, mostly Tennessee Achieves, we think about high school students, and that is very different from thinking about the adult learner in many ways, but high school student has a lot of different subgroups there. So how can we get smarter in that space?
I mean, I'd say first, and we spent a lot of time, Rosye and I, with ETS, understanding various populations, whether it's a veteran returning from Iraq, whether it's, as I said before, maybe even a single dad or a single mom with kids. We went across all ages and many spectrums, first generation, college, career, like Rosye mentioned. So there are a number of sectors that we profiled, and we brought those students together to say what is it that will help you be successful? Or on the other end, what made you successful in your own mind? And we also step back. I'll make one more comment about this, which has been with me since we started College Promise. Students who need more college beyond high school or dropped out in college or whatever happened, they went to work. Many students, over 60% in the community college, have to work while they're in community college, whether they're getting training or just straight on the degree, the education they need to go on to a degree. And, for those students, I really have come to the fact that many are not confident and many don't have the relationship that, that you can see in parents and communities that really want to invest in education and training. So they need, for example, Rosye, I think Tennessee led the way, getting the students a mentor, a mentoring program across a state. What a fantastic thing. And if they have family support, but the parents never went to college, or we have some now where the parents, the mother and child are getting educated at the same time.
I love those stories.
I had 3 people in one family, grandfather, father, and child, getting their 2-year degree at the same time. Parent came over from Vietnam, no money, worked his way into a small business, and married, had a child, brought the father over, but they all wanted education and they were all in different levels, high school, college, and, running the business. So that is the future. Can we get, and I wrote a book on this with some folks from University of Alabama Policy Center, educating the top 100, giving people the sense that Rosye said about hope and inspiration and results. So that's what drives, I think, all of us.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, I think it's important to marry good data with good policy so that you have well-informed interventions, right? At the end of the day, we need to be fact-based. We need to have policy that reflects realistic interventions that will move the needle. And then I think more broadly speaking, look, people are complex, right? And I think there's a humility in this work that often gets overlooked, which is you have to humbly say, I don't know everyone, right? I don't know every student. I have not walked their journey. But I can work hard to understand what are types of dimensions of students. What are things like being potentially, having certain, disabilities that need to be addressed. And how does that interplay if they're also a veteran? Or how does that interplay if they're a single parent? How does that interplay if their English is a second language? How do all of these pieces that create the individual interact with each other so that we can braid interventions and programs that are informed and are respectful, right? Because as Krissy, you and I say this all, like, not only does one size fit, not only does one size not fit all, but it's incredibly disrespectful to assume that without good information, without good landscape analysis and conversation with our students, that we can design something for them. Like, we need them to help us really understand these needs are, and we've got to approach that with humility and respect. And I think that's at the core of the movement is understanding the interrelationships of all of these student dimensions and how those play out when they enter school, when they go into college, when they go into the workplace, and then how can we braid this together in our programs so that we can set them up for success.
I love all of that. I think that's one of the things that we've really thought a lot about at tnAchieves is you get each student's on their own journey in some capacity, facing their own sets of challenges, and each program that we've developed has really meant to address a certain student population that the data told us we're going to have trouble graduating from college. So I totally agree with that. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit, kind of going back to what you guys were talking about earlier, and I love to hear that College Promise is really taking this workforce mindset, that it's not just about going to college, right? We could all talk about that, but really the goal is to prepare students to enter the workforce and find meaningful careers. We've launched, we changed our logo to say building Tennessee's future workforce. It used to say changing lives, transforming communities, and we still want to do that. Absolutely. But really the ethos of our work now is this goal of building Tennessee's future workforce by connecting students with high quality post-secondary pathways. We've talked a lot about here, like how important it is to get different students' perspectives. I think it's equally as important to get, when you look at a place like Tennessee, sure, we want the colleges to understand and buy into this idea, but it's equally as important that local governments are doing the same thing, and local nonprofits that maybe don't work in higher ed are doing the same thing. And that, I think maybe the most important piece of this is that employers are invested in this and seeing that the idea of tuition-free college is an end to their workforce challenges, right? So if you guys were to talk to a large employer, if it's a Nissan or a Hilton hotel group or Blue Cross Blue Shield or somebody that I'm not even thinking of across the country, what is the message to them, and why should they support College Promise, tnAchieves, and just be in this with us?
Rosye, I was going to ask you to respond first, because we changed our name also, just like Tennessee. So you might want to talk about that and then go deeper into, economic mobility, et cetera.
Yeah, we're obviously very interested in creating promising, we talk a lot about promise pathways. We talk about college, career, and community. There's dimensions to the program that have evolved for us over time, but I've spent a lot of time in workforce and mobility, right? And I would say Martha and I complement each other in that I tend to lean more towards the workforce, and she is obviously incredibly, bar none, hands down on post-secondary education. And I think when you're talking, look, employers know what they need, and they know what they need years before they're actually sourcing the talent, right? They actually have, especially your large, complex employers, they're rarely brought to the table. They are rarely brought to the table to have a conversation because, I'm going to discuss my bias very quickly here. I think sometimes when you're in the service of helping students, your bias naturally begins and ends with the student. But if you're really about eliminating poverty, creating mobility, you need to understand that customer at the end of the journey is also an employer, right? And if that employer is not part of that conversation, if they don't feel included, if they don't understand what are the talent needs, what are you seeing in your local community, how can they help you with career exploration, workforce exploration, then we're doing a disservice to all. And employers in particular, I think, can be such a powerful partner in career exploration. I've ran a bunch of pilots with thousands of participants over my career. And the saddest part to me in the world of career is that many of our students in the Promise movement have a limited worldview of jobs that they potentially have available to them. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about what money looks like, what money and wealth building looks like, what are the different stages of wealth accumulation. And employers get this. Employers understand how their ascension works, how their developmental tracks and pathways work. Even the order that students take courses in can put them in new jobs, short-term and part-time jobs at higher income levels. And that's what we're about. Like, we're doing a lot of work around career exploration, mobility, sequencing. It's beyond credentials of value. It's actually really digging into this notion of how do we really get to wealth building conversations, and that involves employers from a career exploration perspective. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done. Can't happen without employers right beside us.
I mean, I just add that more of a example of Des Moines Community College had a partnership with AccuMold. AccuMold wanted to expand, and they make parts that are machined for all kinds of businesses. And they did a program with Des Moines called AccuMold Scholars. And they picked high school students to have internships with that company while they were in high school. They paid them. And then they paid for, at that time, above and beyond tuition. If tuition, if the student could afford tuition, great. But many couldn't. And so they filled in. And, I know that whole national movement in corporate decided at some point over the years that education should take care of that. And so this AccuMold Scholars Program, when they went to the community college and beyond, some went beyond, but some went right to AccuMold. And the company expanded. They told me they bought 8 acres of land and they were expanding. So it's the kind of thing that, like, a paid internship really matters for students. And it's beyond a family, the family work. So there's books that many students work while they're in college and examples of students who go into training programs. But the ones who have the hands-on experience understand that there are many more jobs. And there are things like little things that students can do that I think Krissy and all of us do, just we do them. if you, for example, took a statistics course anywhere in a training program in a college, and you put that on your resume, when the companies search for employees, that pulls out your resume. So I think there's a lot of internal computer-based assets that companies are way ahead of with, robotics and AI. I saw the robotics lab at Milwaukee Area Community College, and that was at the end of a welding program that you had to learn this very complicated machine if you wanted to continue it as a welder, as a high-end welder, which would increase your income and also increase your skills at the same time in the new technologies. And so I just think there are certain fundamentals that we can all play in, whether we're a teacher or a corporate entity, a corporate HR, or even the management consultants who come in right from an MBA program. Take on a student, be a mentor, and give them access to some of the things that they've never thought about.
Then, one snippet, which is we do a very good job at talking to employers about how hardworking our students are. I want to add to that a message of they also have high aspiration, right? Because I think employers would like to understand better the notion of aspiration of these students. And the only way to get to that is to help grow some of that knowledge. We know that first job, if they don't place at the right income level, if their negotiation skills aren't there, we know that they'll move jobs within the first 3 years if they're not able to find that cultural fit. And so I think an opportunity for us is not just in helping tell the story of how hardworking they are and that they possess the skills that are needed for the position, but it's to build that high aspiration, that social capital that's going to help them move and connect to an employer and stay with that employer.
And how can they show, teachers in their classrooms in high school or professors that they are motivated, that they are confident when they come from places where they don't know what it is to show that. And they are incredibly motivated. But I had many students over the year that didn't go to the office hours. And I was in line last night. I shouldn't even mention this, but I was at line at Dairy Queen last night. And there were 2 high school students behind me. And I said, well, what are you doing? And they said they are going to the vocational school. And I said, what do you want to be? And one said plumber, and the other said electrician. And they both said, our skills are growing in areas we never imagined because we have to manage technology in order to manage the jobs that we are going into. And they're getting the training at the same time, in addition to the skills, in addition to the knowledge base of many, many things. I mean, I think everybody in this country would hope, not expect, but hope that students have a broad range of skills so they can cross professions over time. And I think there was data in my early years, students changed jobs 5 to 10 times in their lifetime. I would say that in my graduation speeches. Now it's 5 to 20 times because we have, the digital students that, spend 1 or 2 years getting skills and move. So we need to understand that. And the last thing I'll say is, I don't think, because we're bipartisan, nonpartisan, we want everyone to work together on this. And that's what we see in the local communities and the states, that this is
much more pragmatic, right? I mean, this is a pragmatic movement, really.
Exactly. And I have a chart that the College Board does every year, which is to show the higher up you get, whether it's education or training, the mobility, the best, education and training. I think that's what we hope for. The more you will pay into the tax base, the better American you will be, the better guide for your family, the better community neighbor. I mean, it goes on and on that it touches everything that these students do.
Ben, you may not know this, but now you do, that Martha is an encyclopedia of anything that you want to know programmatically across the country. And she also interviews students at the Dairy Queen.
Well, that's why she knows all of it.
That's why she's Martha Kanter. Rosye, I'd like to end. First of all, thank you both so much. You're both
Thank you.
So busy, and I love you both so much, and I'm so thankful to be on this journey with you. I would love to know from your perspective, like what's on the horizon. I love this whole idea around wealth creation. And, as you both were speaking, all I could think about is, we want to do this work at scale. And so it's about doing it with fidelity, with integrity. And, as Ben was talking, all I can think internally, we have this ethos of meeting students where they are. So whoever they are, wherever they are, and how do you do that at the massive scale at which we exist? So I would love just, where's the movement going next? Help inform us in ways that we can be smarter and obviously working more effectively for the students and families we serve.
So I will pull up and say at a national level where we are today in 2025 is we're seeing data that is alerting us in an alarming way that we're starting to lose the plot when it comes to getting young men interested post high school in certificates training or post-secondary education, and that is alarming, right? Because that has a bunch of ripple effects in communities. We know that that can impact their ability to not only have hopefulness and prosperity, but also even find, a partner in life, having a family, being able to connect to the American dream. And so we are working with states, especially those that have higher birth rates, right? Because again, all of these things start, playing out. And how can we create targeted interventions to make sure that we are being thoughtful about creating pathways for all? And I think, and the message here is we want all of our students to have pathways. So we've got to keep an eye on where we start to see gaps. If you would have told me in the 80s that we would have this problem today, I would not have believed you, because the problem was reversed, right? We were trying to encourage young girls to go ahead and go into fields and break through into education, where right now they're graduating at higher rates than boys are. And they're going to college at higher rates as well, right? They're having just different outcomes. So now the conversation is, how do we get this balance? And as Martha says, this isn't a political intervention. This is all about how do you keep a healthy balance in the movement to make sure we're meeting the needs of all students. I think also at a national level, we're keeping eyes on programs such as yours, in the sense of, do we have strong supports and financial sustainability in place? When you have 450 programs, 38 states, at that point, you recognize this is cross-cutting everything. Governors of every political leaning are involved here. Everyone is interested in ensuring that there is a healthy national talent pipeline, but you have to also ensure that you can deliver on the promise. And so financial sustainability, the ability to create programs that are relevant and engaging with the students they're intended to serve. We're spending a lot of time in conversations with governors and conversations with program leaders like you, Krissy. I'm so grateful you're part of the Leadership Council at a national level, because you're able to bring the scale of Tennessee into these conversations, which needs to happen. And then I think in general, we have to be up to date, up to speed on the fast-paced transformation of work. Because again, AI, technology advancements, investment contraction, all of these things have structural implications to jobs, have structural implications to geographic movement of people. Communities are losing workers, right? Not gaining them in places where we want to see more healthy, thriving economies. And so as you start seeing these pieces, we have a job to help educate, raise awareness, work with community leaders to ensure that we're helping to inform, so students and scholars and employers can be part of solutions with us. And so I think just in general, It's really about upping our game, staying up to speed with the data, making sure we're agile and pivoting, that we can't work in a silo, and ensuring that we put that humility forward, and ensuring we're also keeping an eye on that destination path for that student that's responsible and well informed.
Well, and I think you have a dual role also of not only like bringing more people to the table, but also making sure that there's a depth within the program that actually serves the students well. And that is I would think that's a challenging balance, right? Because everybody's at a different starting place and you guys are the ones sort of setting the table. And so how do you provide the inspiration or the technical assistance or the, fill in the blank that those programs need in real time? So I think we're in an exciting place, but also a place of, to your point, that agility matters more now than maybe ever.
Yeah, that made me think of we're talking to the director of Oak Ridge National Lab tomorrow. And as you're talking about this ever-changing workforce and what careers will look like, I don't think there's anybody better to talk to about that than somebody that's that deeply ingrained in the Department of Energy. So this is inspiring me to think of some questions for tomorrow.
Great.
And I just think, from a big perspective, we want to be as impactful as we can at the national level. And the way to do that is to show what states like Tennessee, states like Washington State, and others are already, Massachusetts, Michigan, Alabama, other states are already doing, that we're not reinventing the wheel, but we are making the best parts of the wheel show up in these conversations, because there are so many what I call lights to look at across the country. And, whether it's a community like San Diego that is tracking their results of these students and where they go into the workforce, whether that we keep abreast of Jeff Stroll's work at the Center for Workforce and the Economy that they're continuing to build after Dr. Carnevale retired. All those pieces fit together for that pipeline we talked at the beginning, the mobility we want students to have and the success we want them to have for a lifetime. And when you think of longevity, I think of, okay, can we make every Promise program, state or local, sustainable? And our communities, the directors, you, Krissy, others are thinking about what are the strategies for sustainability, not only fiscal, but building in those strategies community-wide or nationally, like a mentor for every student. I think College Promise going into the future is going to take all the pieces that make hopefully the majority of students impact their success, really pan them out and help people understand them through the research and policy that local communities and states are putting in place. And a lot of them are putting, for example, a computer requirement in a high school. A lot of them are doing different kinds of things. I know when I was college president, De Anza College had an automotive program, and there was only one girl in this program. And I saw her because they do a big food bank every December, and they get 10,000 cans of food. And this woman, which wasn't really a girl, young woman, was on the top of a truck showing all the good things that this automotive tech group of students had done. Well, they want to be, 1 year we'll get them engine machining. 2 years we'll get them a training degree. More than 2 years now, 4 years, we now, looking back, we have a 4-year automotive technology bachelor's degree. And the applied bachelor's degree is something that I think many people don't even know. So, one thing leads to the next in terms of mobility. I worked a very long time with the construction leaders in California. They wanted people who spoke perfect English, could write well, think well. And, we put ESL training at the work site. It's just that responsiveness of local communities and states to where the need is most. So I think that's what we're going to commit ourselves going forward. And we are going to continue to deepen our relationship with Tennessee, because you're in the forefront of looking at so much policy research and sustainability, as well as service to students beyond the tuition. The tuition really is not free. We talk about it, but there's so much more than tuition, and they work hard for that tuition. Let me tell you, giving them an earned support mechanism, some amount of financing, it helps students tremendously be able to live their lives and afford books, like the example I mentioned. So just appreciate the time with you all and hope that people hear us and help us.
Well, thanks for all that you guys have poured into the movement, into students, into programs, into me. I feel like I have learned so much from the two of you, and certainly Tennessee Achieves is stronger because of your influence. So thanks for today, but thanks for all the days before today too. So thankful for you both. Thanks for time.
Thank you for having
me. Take good care.
Thank y'all. Thank you for joining us for this episode of At Scale, the Tennessee Achieves podcast. Each conversation is a step toward a deeper understanding of how we can collectively expand opportunity and increase post-secondary access and success for all students in Tennessee. To continue following this work, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Subscribing ensures you never miss an episode, and your rating or review helps others discover the stories and insights that we'll share. Together, we're not only supporting students, we're building Tennessee's future workforce. Thank you for listening.